Welcome to Tech Leadership Talks, the podcast that brings you advice, insights, and knowledge from industry leaders and experts on how to navigate managing in a technical field. Tech Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering and Technical Management, an online graduate program that trains industry professionals for leadership positions. I'm Katie, METM's digital marketer and your host for this episode. In today's episode, I am talking to Kat Pressler, who is the APJ Enablement Partner at Qualtrics. We discuss Kat's unique path to working within a software company, the importance of EQ in sales leadership, and staying passionate within your leadership role. So hello and welcome. My name is Katie Hudson, and today I am here with Kat Pressler. How are you this evening for me, morning for you, right? So good.
Yeah, it's very complicated with the long time zone. So yeah, morning for me. I've got my coffee, so I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Good, I'm good. So you're in Australia. Where in Australia are you?
Yeah, so I work in Sydney. I technically live in Sydney, but I live in a little beachy town called Manly, just outside of Sydney. It's really lovely.
Okay, so can you tell me what your current job title is and about the company you work for?
So I work for a company called Qualtrics. I'll start there. Mm-hmm. We are a survey, data analytics, market research company. So basically anytime that you've taken a survey when you've gotten off a flight or I actually remember during residency week when we checked into the hotel, we got like a text. I was like, hey, how was your check-in experience? That's actually a survey of ours. So it's hate to break it to you, it's not an actual person. But when you respond to it and say, it was good, but I'm missing my towels, that goes into a whole system of action and allows the business to go and kind of fix an experience before it turns into a bad one. So we call it an experience management company, but essentially, survey, data analytics, market research. Actually, A&M uses us as well. So any METM survey that gets sent out is usually a Qualtrics survey. So what do I do? I've been with the company now for 5 years. Like I said, I just moved over to Sydney for this role. I actually run, it's a little bit different, but I run all of our sales training for the entire APJ region. So that is everything from India to New Zealand. We are in 6 different regions, 10-ish countries out here. Across, I actually pulled these numbers today. We're across 4 different time zones where our biggest gap, if we thought scheduling this was hard, is 7.5 hours. So literally it's like workday starts in India and it's ending in New Zealand. And it's just absolutely wild. So
how did you get involved? Like, what was your undergrad?
Yeah, so I probably have the most random story to get here. So my undergrad, I did corporate communications, actually. And I had a minor in business and English. And then I went straight into tech. I had worked at Apple during my undergrad. And so I already kind of knew I wanted to go into the tech field. Started working at Oracle on the sales side. Really liked the technical side of it, so I wanted to go more into like solution engineering and solution consulting piece. And then my manager got fired, and I kind of started mentoring some of the people on my team, and fell in love with that side of it, and moved to Qualtrics from Oracle to go into the training side. Really came out of school having no idea what I wanted to do and kind of fell into a job that I'm incredibly passionate about and lucky to have.
How did you decide to pursue your METM degree?
It was when I was at Oracle. I worked specifically with manufacturing companies. And there's an organization in Austin called ARMA. It's the Austin Regional Manufacturing Association. And we had a conference, or they had a conference, and we had a booth for our platform. And I was just kind of walking around, like taking a break during the day, and stumbled into Dr. Zogi. And we immediately just hit it off with a great conversation. His daughters went to undergrad at UT, and that's where I did my undergrad. I took a pamphlet to actually give to my Aggie brother to tell him to apply to the program. And I had given Yogi my card, and he called me and was like, "We have an info session. I know you're not an engineering undergrad, but you should come." I was like, "No." I was like, there's no way. I did communications. There's no way. And based on what I wanted to do at the time in my career, I went to the info session just because I'll be honest, it was a free meal and I was like 24.
I mean, yeah.
I got really excited about the program. It was really interesting to me. It wasn't, you didn't have to be an engineer in that like true sense of what it is. And being in tech and knowing I wanted to stay in tech and wanted to get more into that management, that leadership side, it just fit really well. And I knew I didn't want to do an MBA because everybody has an MBA at this point. So I was kind of searching for that program that fit, and just again, luckily kind of just stumbled into it. Then the rest was history. I applied and got into the program and did it.
Can you explain a little bit about how it doesn't just have to be specifically like your METM cohort, but like working off of other people in your career, how that helps you with the conflicts that arise and in leadership positions and things like that?
Yeah. So I'll start with the cohort. Really, it was our residency week. It was, the pain of having assignments due every day and having to go back to that like college mentality of just constantly doing homework. And so we would be, downstairs having a beer or a glass of wine and working on our projects together. Mm-hmm. But then also we just, had like one final night where we all went to the chicken and kind of bonded over that. There were lots of experiences that, Aggie undergrad alum wanted to share with everybody, that if we didn't go to A&M for our undergrad, we didn't really know, but we had heard about. One in particular, actually probably my favorite residency week memory, my friend Brett in our class used to be a tour guide on campus. And so he was like, "Let's grab the trucks, we'll park it at Bonfire, and then we'll walk around and
he'll give a tour."
And like Kyle and he'll give a tour. And so we put most of the trucks at Bonfire, and then we took we loaded everybody into the truck bed, and we drove it to Kyle and parked it in the garage. And then the plan was we'll walk all the way back to Bonfire, and then we'll go back and pick up the truck. What a group of about 20 engineers did not factor in was when you put 20 people in a truck that's already a little bit lifted, it sinks it down. So when we went to go drive it out of the garage, it was too tall. We were in like full panic mode because half the people had gone back to the hotel, and we were cracking up, and we saw a group of cadets out for a run. And I will never forget Brett just ran up to them and goes, "Howdy, I'm class of 2011, or not 2011, 2005. Can you help us and just sit in my truck?" And I was like, "Brett, this is the beginning of a kidnapping. Like, this is horrible. You can't ask strangers to come and sit in your truck." And but they did.
I'm sure they were like, "Oh yeah, this sounds like fun."
Yeah, they were like, "Absolutely, get us out of our run." And so they were lovely, and they did, and we just packed as many people as we could just find around campus at like midnight into the truck to get right out.
Funny.
Yeah, but that was the big thing, was like we had some of those like really fun things that we did outside of the program. And I think the other thing from a communication perspective and like why we were so close is we were all unique. We all came from very different backgrounds. And so for me, being a communications undergrad and an English minor, I actually spent a lot of time helping people write their papers and editing and that kind of side of it, because that was something that a lot of my class wasn't used to. And so we were really there to support each other that week in particular. And then as we moved into being virtual, that was really what made it what made it special and made us come together closer as a cohort was that we had built that bond. And so we weren't afraid to ask for help as the semester went on. Because there were definitely some things that were more challenging for me or things that I had never really worked on in the past. And vice versa. There were some things that came really easily for me that others had never done. And so we just kind of recognized, and I think this ties into the leadership piece as well, is when you have a really good group of diverse people and diverse backgrounds, that's when you can come together really strong as a team or even as friends, because you have the opportunity to be vulnerable and ask for help and recognize your weaknesses may be somebody else's strengths, and vice versa. Your strengths may be somebody else's weakness. And that's how everybody just grows and becomes better, is leaning on each other. So
yeah, I love that. Is there like one or two courses in METM that you feel like you really use every day in your job now, or something that you've like learned in one of them when it comes to leadership?
Dr. Zogi's going to love this. His on EQ and emotional intelligence. That's actually what I did my capstone in. And it's something that really has like helped change the way that I view the way I run my trainings and work with my individuals. So the reason behind that is EQ is something that everybody has. Some people might not have a lot of it, but it's something you can work on. It's not something that's definite, and I'm really big on a growth mindset. As long as you have that mindset of, I'm able to change this. I'm not my circumstances. I am not born this way. I can adjust, I can learn, I can change, is really important. But what I learned from that and what I did my capstone on was around EQ in sales leadership, and it's the way it affects quota attainment. And so it was this really interesting practice of understanding different backgrounds of sales leaders. And what really came out of it was there were certain individuals that had a lower score on empathy, and their teams were the ones that were performing the worst. And so it's interesting because you think about empathy as maybe not a sales skill, right?
Right.
But what it really does come down to is you have to be able to put yourself in the shoes of who you're talking to or who you're selling to, or understand what's going on with them. And when we were able to actually take a look at that, run some courses on empathy and how we adjust it and change it and create these action plans, we did see a shift. And what we ended up doing after the fact as well, I work at a survey company, so we do lots of surveys.
Yeah.
But we do an employee pulse survey, which essentially means we check in on our employees and see, what's your intent to stay? Do you feel fulfilled by your job? But one of those questions is, rate how much you agree versus don't agree with this statement of, my manager cares about me as a person. And we saw a shift in that particular metric after we had run these trainings on empathy. And that was a really important piece that we didn't necessarily plan to track or look at, but it had a direct impact on the employees' lives, not just from a selling perspective and how they were interacting with customers, but truly on like their happiness in the workplace and the fact that they did or did not feel seen by their manager. So that course, I've definitely continued to take with me. And it's a great way to kind of kickstart the program as well, because it takes a really personal approach to leadership instead of just kind of the general management courses that you tend to see.
Do you use EQ skills when you're going to build trust with your team?
I use it in a couple of ways with my team. So like one, I've definitely become more analytical about my team, and like, oh, they're high in empathy, but they're low in impulse control. That was one that I'm very low in. The Amazon quick satisfaction is a big deal for me. And so I can kind of see those changes or those differences. But the other thing about it is when you start thinking through that lens of these different pieces of emotional intelligence and EQ, it changes the way that you lead different people. It takes you out of, which hopefully most people don't have, like a one size fits all approach to leadership. But when you can kind of start to understand, this person is really high on self-actualization. That's something that I need to make sure I'm giving them more positive reinforcement and positive feedback more consistently. Whereas if there's maybe somebody who's a little bit lower on that, or, has a different area, and I'll go back to the impulse control. Like maybe I've got somebody that's an impulse control, and that's something that I can then kind of coach to and realize, like, hey, if they're just calling me really quickly to ask a question, or I'm getting, rapid fire 40 texts just in a row, like that's just the way that they operate. That's something that makes them feel comfortable. And I have to change my expectations and adjust how I lead those individuals. My team a little while ago, which was really cool, we actually did like a Myers-Briggs for everybody. And so it's similar, it's the same thing. And or it's the same in that way where once you kind of understand who somebody is and what these like kind of 4 key elements are to that person, you kind of recognize like, oh, this person's being really direct with me. It's not because they're being rude. It's because that's the way they communicate. Whereas like maybe somebody else is a little bit softer and gentler, and it takes in a way, it takes the personal out of it, where you stop taking things personally and you start seeing somebody as an individual person in a sense. And so, it's just a really cool change in how you look at leadership and how you interact with the team.
Talking about emotional intelligence with leadership. Now, so many people are working remote. And so it's nice to hear you talk about still connecting with people and not just looking at them as like, oh, the box is getting the work done for me. There's a level of leadership where it's like, no, you need to connect to the people that you're leading and mentoring.
Oh yeah. And and especially now, like I'm sure we're all sick and tired of the phrase unprecedented times, but in our ever continuing unprecedented times, my company recently actually, like 2 weeks ago, went through a really big round of layoffs. And that was something that came up a lot about leadership was, their EQ and their empathy towards everybody. And there were some things that they did get really right. And they did a great job of making sure that they were in front of us and they, were explaining the situation and giving the background and the detail. There were other points where they totally missed, and it came across as inauthentic, and it came across as, in some ways, a little bit manipulative. And, we had lost that trust just so instantly. It takes so long to build that trust, and it can go away so quickly. But one of my new leaders shared a clip, and I think it goes directly with all of this, with EQ, with leadership, with everything. Have you watched Ted Lasso?
Oh my gosh, yes.
It usually leaves you feeling happy, and it's very real and very relatable. And my new leader, as we were going through all of these changes and everything, he kicked off a meeting and he was like, I want to share a Ted Lasso clip. And if you haven't seen it, go look it up because it's really, really good. But it is the clip of him playing darts with Rupert. Yeah. And he says, be curious, not judgmental. And I think that's so huge. And it's so huge, but it also ties directly back to that EQ. Is the judgmental piece is where we start taking things personally. And we think through the lens of everything's about me. And it's, people are reacting this way because of me or my situation or what's happening in my life. Whereas when we flip that switch to be curious, it's what's going on with them? Why did that come across as harsh? Are they having a bad day? Are they not taking things well? And actually asking those questions instead of jumping to conclusions. Yeah. And so I thought that was a really good way to talk about, how we're going through all of these changes, how things are going to continue to change in the future. All of that good stuff is, you have to be curious, not judgmental, because you have to take, I keep saying this, and I can't think of a better way to say it, but you can't take things personally, but you have to be a person.
So you seem so passionate. How do you keep that passion and that motivation going into, being in the workforce for several years now?
Yeah. A couple of different things. One, I do truly love my job. I have a job that I really care about. I love my company. I love what we stand for. And I think that's really important, is finding a place where you align your values to the business values. That's a big piece for me. The other one is balance. It's all about balance. I am the kind of person where I will still respond to emails and Slack messages and whatnot in the evening. But if I take my PTO, or I go out of town, or I'm visiting family, or I'm with my grandmother, my phone's off. I'm not touching it. I'm not looking at it. I'm living in whatever moment I'm actually in. I think we got caught up in COVID, and this is where I really started putting that into practice of like shutting off when I need to, and not talking about work. In COVID, that was, all we had was, I was going through the program at the time, and then I had work, and that was it. I'd moved from my desk to my kitchen table to my bed, and never really shut off, and was constantly on. And that's when I felt myself burn out, and I stopped caring about what I was doing. And so the balance is a key piece. And there's lots of companies and jobs and roles and projects that can be really impactful and can also be really exciting. And so I think that's the big thing is, I do genuinely love my job and love my company and love my people. And when you genuinely care about the work you're doing and the people you're working with, it's really easy to stay passionate about what you're doing, just because, one, I want to be successful, but two, I want them to be successful. Yeah. And so that's how I got into this role in the first place, was, helping out my team, mentoring my team, seeing their success is what drives me.
Okay. One more question before we wrap up. In the fall of 2024, Texas A&M and the University of Texas are playing football against each other again for the first time in a long time. Will you be wearing maroon or orange on that day?
I had a feeling that question was going to come up. I actually have the best of both worlds. Okay. We do a college day every year at work when we kick off football season. Yeah. So I actually have a T-shirt that is half maroon and half burnt orange. So I'm probably going to break that one out. Yeah. So I can
you can go back, you can turn to the side for whoever's winning. Yeah. Whoever's not making a fool of themselves.
Yeah. I don't know where I want to go to the game, but I don't know where I'm going to sit, because somebody's going to yell at me from one side.
Yeah.
You're set up for failure. So, I'll root for both. It's a tough one. I'll do all the yells, but at the same time, I'm going to throw my horns up every so often.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much, Kat, for talking to me and taking time out of your Friday. Thank you for listening in to today's episode. Tech Leadership Talks is brought to you by Texas A&M University's Master of Engineering Technical Management. To learn more, visit metm.tamu.edu.